The hockey news never stops out here on Locked On, and today we're going to have a special guest from the hockey news. So tune in for that and more on this episode of Locked On Anaheim Ducks.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for making Locked On Ducks your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bet now. I'm Kyle Carr. I'm a lifelong Anaheim Ducks fan. I've spent multiple years covering collegiate sports, including college hockey. But today, as always, we are talking about the Anaheim Ducks on Locked On Ducks. And today I do have a very special guest. I am joined by Derek Lee of the Hockey News. Welcome, Derek. How are you?
Hey, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Derek, give our fans a little breakdown of what you're involved in, how you got involved with the Ducks, and what you do for the Hockey News.
Yeah, so I've been with the Hockey News covering the Ducks, going to the games, going to practices for about a year and a half now. Before that, I worked with the Sporting Tribune, and before that, I was with the Hockey Writers. So graduated in 2020 during COVID, so there wasn't really anything going on, no sports, not really much of anything. And I kind of just, when sports kind of started getting back on, and obviously nobody could go to the games, so I kind of applied to cover Ducks remotely. They were looking for just anyone to do coverage, and I mean it's pretty easy to just watch the game at home and write whatever you feel like. So that's kind of how I got started. I worked for the school newspaper when I was in college, so I kind of had familiarity about covering sports from that perspective. But it wasn't really till I got to the Sporting Tribune where I spoke with the Rosh Markazi. He kind of got me in with the Ducks, and that's when I started going to practices and then eventually games, and then now I work for the Hockey News, kind of do the same thing, and I do that with Patrick Present. So that's been just such a blast, especially being a Ducks fan for however many years. Like I think I want to say like 10 or 11 years now, and I'm just going from being just a fan to now being able to cover the team.
Oh, absolutely. It's awesome. You've definitely had some pretty intense experiences. I've followed with a lot of your articles and with Patrick Present and everything, and you guys do a great job. So thank you for what you do as a fan and now a reporter. It's been nice to have your insight out there.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course. And unfortunately, as much as, I'm sure we're all tired of talking about it, we got to dive into it. The Mason McTavish signing / non-signing. What is going on? Is there anything you've heard? Should we be concerned if you're a fan of the Ducks?
Well, one of my favorite sayings is I'm just a guy. Like, I'm pretty lucky to be able to cover the team, but I don't really have any sources. I mean, Eric Stevens, that was like the gold standard for me when I was in high school and following the line. He doesn't cover the Ducks as a day-to-day basis as he used to because he just has so many responsibilities now for the Athletic. But, for me personally, I think I'm not too worried about McTavish right now. I know a lot of people are concerned about how Trevor Zegras and Jamie Drysdale, that kind of went through training camp with their RFA negotiations a couple years ago, and I know people don't want it to be the same thing. I don't think it's really kind of the same thing. I know it's obviously concerning that we're almost the middle of August and there hasn't really been anything kind of to talk about when it comes to McTavish, and now there's a bunch of trade rumors and there's all these things about which teams are interested in him. But for me personally, I'm not really worried. I think eventually he will sign. I think if I had to peg it, I think he's going to sign maybe late August, early September before training camp. I think that is the deadline that, not really like set deadline, but I think that's kind of the idea that everyone has is you don't want to make that same mistake that they did a couple years ago with Drysdale and Zegras, where you had a new coach in Greg Cronin coming in and you wanted these young guys that are supposedly part of the core to be there, and they weren't, and then they ended up getting hurt, and that kind of just led to where we are now. So you don't want to repeat the same thing with Mason McTavish, with Joel Quenneville coming in a whole basically new coaching staff. So I know it's every day hearing certain things about McTavish and whatnot, but for the most part, we haven't really heard anything from those like true top insiders like Elliot Friedman, Pierre LeBrun, like guys like that. And I know that those guys go on vacation; they have time to themselves too. So maybe that's why we haven't heard anything. But just because there hasn't been anything really super concrete coming out from that situation, I don't think there's any reason to worry just yet.
It seems like it's kind of a trail of attrition at this point, and whichever side's going to give in to try to get into training camp. From what I'm hearing, mostly it's just like a term issue, and I kind of get where Pat Verbeek is at and his trying to protect the players and get them more on a bridge deal. But I mean, is that worth souring the relationship with a player like Mason McTavish?
Yeah, it's weird because we've seen it like we just talked about with Zegras and Drysdale. Is kind of Verbeek tries to grind it down with these RFAs and try to get these bridge deals at like the most efficient thing possible, and he wasn't able to do that with Lukas Dostal because Dostal had arbitration, so he was able to weaponize that, kind of set a deadline for that before they got to arbitration. But McTavish can't do that because he has no arbitration rights, and we kind of saw that a little bit with Sam Colangelo, Tim Washy. Obviously, they're not as valued, but like they're not as integral to the core right now as McTavish is. But those guys also, it took a while for their deals to get done, and then it ends up that their deals are pretty much almost league minimum. So it's really interesting to see it from that perspective and see where Verbeek's trying to go with this, and if it's whether it's term or salary. It's really interesting just because we have the rising cap coming up, and so you also have to take that into account. And like when you get signed guys like Mikael Granlund to $7 million, it looks kind of iffy right now, but in a couple of years that's already going to be like a second line, third line center salary. So it's kind of interesting to look at it from that. Just kind of going off on a tangent, really, but yeah, but it does it like I understand from the fan perspective of why is this taking so long? Why are they trying to kind of milk everything and make sure that the player doesn't have any leverage? But at the same time, I feel like McTavish and his party, like his agency, they do have leverage because there's no Trevor Zegras anymore. There's not really a second line center of the future behind Leo Carlson if McTavish isn't in the picture. So you can kind of they can kind of have that in their head of, well, we're certainly valued in that way, so let's try to get the most out of it from this negotiation standpoint.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot of the rumors were just trying to be built off of the fact that Roger McQueen was drafted, but it's pretty much noted everywhere that his development's going to take a long time, and McTavish is the guy, and you can see how many teams are desperate for a 2C right now. And like you said, it seems like they kind of have the leverage. And for me personally, my perspective, I feel like McTavish is a guy that could even potentially have a C on his chest in Anaheim. You've been able to kind of see his dynamic in the locker room. Is that kind of far-fetched, or is my assumption there sort of on point with him having that leadership quality?
I think if you talk to some of the players in the locker room, they certainly say that he has leadership qualities. I mean, he captained Team Canada during World Juniors, so at least from that perspective, people have definitely seen the qualities that he can show, like as a leader, whether it's as a captain or just being one of those guys in the room without a letter that's still showing leadership, like Jacob Trouba, for example. He's a guy that came in, he was a former captain with the New York Rangers, doesn't have a letter, but he's still one of those guys relied on to kind of be that leader presence in the locker room. So I think down the line, I'm not really sure if McTavish will be the captain. I think that's a guy that I kind of looked at before Radko Gudas was named the captain as potentially being that guy down the road, and he still could be because Gudas isn't going to be captain for much longer, maybe one or two more seasons. So especially to being one of what you would assume is going to be one of the young pieces of the core. Making sure that McTavish is valued and that you show that he has a place on the team. I think that's really important.
Absolutely. And you mentioned it before, there's no more Trevor Zegras. So this is the guy that you had a lot of kind of viral moments with and stuff. What are your thoughts on Z being out of the locker room now?
I think it's going to be interesting, especially because when you saw how it kind of was when he was injured, and that been quite a bit over the last couple of years. There's not as much creativity on the ice, but also in the locker room, you talk to guys like Ryan Strome, for example, they bring up, oh, like we missed having him in the locker room because he has that vibrant energy. He has that exuberance. He just keeps things light. And I mean, McTavish had talked about that too a little bit because he was really close with Zegras and with Drysdale. And so taking a guy like that out of your locker room, I think that can kind of maybe change the dynamics a little bit. I mean, you bring in Chris Kreider too as well, so you have a good group of veteran guys like Strome, Vetrano, Alex Killorn, Trouba, as I mentioned, Gudis. Those are all guys that are valuable veterans. Like maybe their play isn't as valuable on the ice as their presence is in the locker room, but you can kind of see what kind of team Pat Verbeek wants us to be. And so it seems like he's valuing more of that veteran presence and trying to create not like a ship shape locker room, because it's not like Zegras was a pest or anything in the room, but you can kind of get the idea of where Verbeek wants to go with this team by the way he's kind of constructed it during this offseason.
Absolutely. Well, we'll kind of get into what we think is going to happen in the next season right after the break. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. So take a flyer on the MVP race, like Josh Allen. Crown your champion in August, like the Buffalo Bills going all the way to the Super Bowl because of Josh Allen, or parlay your division winner dark horses. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. So now we're looking at the present. We kind of have the roster set in stone for the most part right now. Where do you project the Ducks landing this year?
In the conference or the division?
We'll go with the division.
I want to say probably fifth. I think it's, they got a little bit better, but also the teams around them got better for the most part. So you have the three that you kind of expect to be in the playoffs, which is Vegas, Edmonton, and the Kings. Despite what kind of moves those guys made during the offseason, they're still better than the Ducks by a wide margin, I feel. Then you got Vancouver. You got teams like Seattle that are also looking to improve. I think Calgary can go either way, depending on what they do with guys like Nazem Kadri and Rasmus Anderson. But yeah, Edmonton, Vegas, LA, and then just for the Ducks to be able to make the playoffs, I think it's wild card, because they're not going to be better than those three teams. So you're already still fighting with 2 or 3 other teams. So I think it's going to be either 5. If there's 6, I think that's probably bad, because I think the Sharks will be at the bottom, and then Calgary maybe after that. So I'm going to say 5th.
Okay. And then speaking of the Kings, do you think they're going to have the Corey Perry curse this year and make it all the way to the end and lose? Or do you think they're going to have a one and done in the playoffs, or even make the playoffs?
Well, I think they'll make the playoffs, but I think the furthest I can see them going is maybe the second round. Like, the way their team is kind of constructed is just, they don't really have that point where they can kind of take things over, right? Like, the Oilers have McDavid and Draisaitl, the Golden Knights have Jack Eichel, and they have Mark Stone, they have guys like that. And I mean, Anze Kopitar has been a great player for so many years. Drew Doughty's been that kind of reliable guy for them. Quentin Byfield's continuing to get better and better, but I don't really see them having like that game-breaking talent where, oh, hey, we need a goal, we need something. Like, they haven't really had that in a while, and that's kind of why they've been there. They've had like that plateau or that kind of ceiling where they can't really go much further than that. And so I would say maybe 1 round or 2, kind of like the last few years have been for them.
Well, that kind of ties in with the Ducks too. I don't really see them having a player or a couple players like that at this point that can be groundbreakers and really drive them through a playoff series if they do make it.
Yeah, but I think compared to the Kings, I think you do see like the potential for more than one. For the Kings, I think it's Byfield, and then maybe if you think Alex Laferriere is going to be that kind of guy, I'm not sure he is, but or even Brent Clark for that matter. But you look at the Ducks, you have Leo Carlsson, you have Cutter Gauthier, you have Mason McTavish, you have a plethora of young guys on the blue line. Like Jackson Lacombe had a great season last year. You hope that he kind of keeps that up. Pavel Minchikov, Owen Zellweger, you hope that those guys are able to get more regular reps and turn into a really strong left-handed side. You guys got guys like Tristan Luneau, who's probably going to be ready to be a full-time NHLer next season. So there's so many potential options. It's just a matter of one of them hitting. And I think we saw a little bit of that at the end of last season with Leo Carlsson and Cutter Gauthier, and just the dynamic pairing that they had after the Four Nations break. So it will be interesting to see which guys kind of take that step like Lacombe did last year, and whether they're able to keep it up all throughout the season.
Absolutely. And how important do you think this new coaching staff is for Anaheim taking the next step? Like, what kind of expectations do you have with the way they're going to develop this team?
I think it's extremely important. I mean, you go from Greg Cronin to Joel Quenneville. I think anyone will say that's a major upgrade. And then you look at the assistant coaches they brought in, Jay Woodcroft, who'd been a head coach for the Oilers for a couple of years, and he's been a coach for however many years before that, just with so many good teams. And then you bring in Ryan McGill, who's experienced with Vegas and the Devils. And then you also still have Peter Budaj as the goaltending coach, and he did a tremendous job with Lukas Dostal and John Gibson last season. And just the ability to have two guys that speak Czech and Slovak, and Peter Mrazek and Dostal. So just being able to have that kind of fluidity with the coaching staff. And I think anyone would argue that just the addition of the coaching staff alone makes it kind of like a B+ offseason for the Ducks, because you're going from a first-time head coach that was in his second season where they didn't really improve very much besides maybe the goaltending and some of the young guys a little bit at the end of the season. And now you're going to the second winningest coach of all time. And granted, he's been removed from the game for how many years because of outside circumstances, and for something that, need to make sure that he's kind of held accountable for and make sure that everything goes smoothly. But I think on the surface, you look at it, Joel Quenneville should be at least an upgrade, and the rest of the coaching staff should be an upgrade as well.
Yeah, it's going to be massive to watch the numbers. Like, you look at the penalty kill, the power play, the shots against, all of that was just, they were basically the top of the league in areas they don't want to be the top of the league. And I'm really hoping that there's a turnaround in those numbers at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like this. They had bottom 10 special teams both of the years that Cronin was the head coach, and so to not only change the head coach but basically like the entire bench, that's got to be worth something. And the guys that you brought in aren't just like first time guys either. These are experienced guys, so to be able to have that much experience with you also ties in to how Verbeek wants the team to be. If they want to make the playoffs, they have to bring in guys that have that kind of experience. So that's why he brought in guys like Trouba last year, Kreider this year, and bringing in Quenneville and Woodcroft and McGill.
It's going to be really fun to watch. I feel like they kind of did the reverse Nashville, where instead of bringing in a bunch of like blue chip players, they brought in blue chip coaches. And I really see a lot of uptake coming from this next year. And I kind of was wondering if there's anyone that you think is going to be a surprise standout for this next season out of the roster that they have right now.
For me, it's tough because some guys that I might not think are surprise standouts are maybe surprise standouts for other like fans, just because I get to see these guys so often, like in practice and things like that. I'm really excited to see how Nikita Nesterenko and Sam Colangelo are going to do. I think this is a really good opportunity for them to get full-time roles. It's most likely going to be as fourth liners, just because that top 9 is just so set in stone for the most part. Also Tristan Luneau, like we talked about earlier, he's probably going to be a full-time NHLer, and just because of the way that things are set up, it's Gudis, Trouba, and then Helleson and Luneau, so it might be a little bit of a rotation like it was last year with Minchikov and Zellweger. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that goes. And then obviously Beckett Seneca, I think that's the guy that everybody kind of wants to see if he's going to be able to make the team or not, if he gets his 9 games, or what happens if he goes back to juniors. So I think maybe that's the surprise, or kind of the X factor, because it just really sucks that he's kind of too good for the CHL now, but he can't play in the AHL. So it's basically sink or swim in terms of just being in the NHL. So yeah, Colangelo and Nesterenko, I'm looking forward to seeing how those guys do in potentially expanded roles, and then back at Seneca as well.
Well, and it sucks that he's missing that new rule being implemented where a team can pick a guy to come underage for the AHL. But we'll get into who we think is going to be the top Duck of the year and more right after this. When it comes, you just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. You need an editor for a video, not an editor for an article. Well, go to Indeed and find the right person for you. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. All right, now we're back with Derek Lee from the Hockey News. And Derek, I want to know, who do you have as the top Duck this next season?
That's a tough one, because for me, the top Duck might not necessarily be the guy who gets the most points, just because you kind of have to look at it as an all-around standpoint. I think the first guy that came to my head is Troy Terry, just because he was the top scorer last year and he plays a lot of different roles for the team. But I'm going to be a little bit bold. I'm going to go Leo Carlson, just because I think he's gonna fill a lot of different roles this season. I think especially if he continues to play on the penalty kill, I think that could be a really important aspect to kind of help him round out his game in his 3rd season. It's very clear that there was something that kind of clicked for him after 4 Nations, and then just going into the World Championships this past summer too. He's really starting to find his groove. And so you look at the way that Cutter Gauthier kind of stood out at the World Championships as well for Team USA. Having those 2 guys on the same line, I think they're going to kind of become inseparable. I mean, dare I say, even the next Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry, where they're just together, and you got to find that 3rd guy to kind of complement those 2 guys. But yeah, I think either Leo or Troy Terry, I think those are the 2 that, in my eyes, would be the candidate for top Duck.
Absolutely. And Troy Terry, great name. That's someone, if you want to feel old or don't want to feel old, don't look at his list of how many seasons he's been in the league now, because to me, he's still this young Troy Terry. And then you look at how long he's been in the league, you're like, oh no, that's a lot of years. But I really love Troy Terry's game. I feel like he's always playing a solid 200-foot game and really knows how to shut games down in the right way. Like you said, he's not really going to show up on the scoreboard as much, but it's all the little things that don't show up on the score sheet that I think Troy Terry really elevates the game.
Yeah, it's funny because I'll talk to Troy and I'll mention how many young guys there are. Like Leo's only 20 and Cutter's 19 or 20, and Troy will just be like, yeah, I feel old even though I'm 27. Like, me and him are the same age. Like, he's like a couple months older than I am. So for him to say that, I'm like, oh, calm down. I don't want to feel old either. So it's just kind of funny to see how much the team has changed since he broke into the league. Like, was it 7 years ago now? 7 years. So,
and he's one of the dads on the team now. Like, it's just a totally down to earth, humble guy. But yeah, it's crazy how different it is. Looking at like Leo and Cutter and their performance at the World Championships this last summer, I haven't really seen any projected Olympic rosters with really any Ducks players on there, other than obviously Lukas Dostal and Clara's going out for Italy. But do you see any other players making the Olympic break from the Ducks?
oh yeah, certainly. I think Leo, when all is said and done, unless he gets hurt, knock on wood, I think he'll be on this Team Sweden roster. And Gudis was one of the first 6 named for Czechia, so it'll be
That's right,
him and
Gudis.
Dostal. Yeah, it'll be him and Dostal for Czechia and Klar for Italy as well. But other than that, I don't think there's any true locks. I mean, they'd have to have just tremendous seasons just because of how many other players will be available because they weren't playing in the playoffs at the time or they weren't nursing injuries and all that. So I think it'll be similar to Four Nations where maybe there's a guy that kind of surprises or a guy that one of these teams thinks can fill kind of a different role. Like Anthony Cirelli has been really integral for Team Canada, and that's a big favorite of John Cooper just because he knows him so well. He played for him in Tampa for how many years. So sometimes it's not even just being about the most skilled. It's can this guy fill a bottom 4 role for me, even though he's a top 6 guy with his domestic team. So maybe Troy Terry, somebody like that, can fill a role because he's able to kind of play both sides of the puck, even though he has a knack for scoring. But other than that, there's not really a lot that come to mind. Like they would just have to have incredible seasons to be on the roster. But I think for me, the one perhaps dark horse would be Jackson Lacombe, just because he also did really well at the Worlds, and he was a big minutes muncher for the team. Even when Zach Werenski came in the team, it was basically Lacombe and Werenski as the top pair for pretty much the entire tournament after Werenski came in. So if Lacombe can kind of keep up how he was playing last season, I think he could have a pretty good shot at making that Team USA roster.
And I kind of got posed this question by someone a little while ago, but they asked, do you think Jackson Lacombe had the uptick in his play because he was more of a Cronin player and will have the same success with Joel Quenneville? And I said, absolutely. I think Joel Quenneville is someone who can take someone like Lacombe and elevate his game exponentially. But do you think he's going to be having that same level of rise this year as he did last year?
I think so. I think the way that he plays, I mean, a lot of the players on the team didn't exactly gel with the style of play that Cronin wanted. So just being able to open up the play a little bit more, and it's not just, funneling point shots to the net and getting rebounds and rinse and repeat. So if these guys are able to kind of control it more with their feet, they're able to move around. I think that gives you a little bit more freedom. It gives you more confidence because you're having the puck on your stick, and obviously that's well suited for someone like Lacombe. That's well suited for pretty much almost all the young defensemen on the Ducks, like Minchikov, Zellweger, Luneau. Those guys, when they have the puck on their stick, they can create a lot. So I think it'll be fun to see Lacombe and how he kind of fits into that role, because if you look at the way that those Panthers teams, when Joel Quenneville was there, you can kind of see the way that players were able to activate from the blue line. It's kind of similar to how I think that he would want the Ducks defensemen to kind of play as well.
Absolutely. And one last one for you. The last guy to stop the puck for the Ducks, Lukas Dostal. What are your expectations with him in net this year?
I think, he's the bona fide starter now. He's got the big contract. John Gibson's no longer around. He's in Detroit. So it's all on Dostal's shoulders now, and he's got a great kind of veteran that he can learn from, fellow countryman, and Peter Mrazek. So I think it's really important that he's just kind of stays at his game. I mean, he's not really one to get super flustered when he's in net. He's always calm and poised, and he has super sound positioning. So I think it's just continuing to take that next step. And for me, the next step is proving that he is the guy. And he showed a lot of that last year when Gibson was injured. So just continuing to maintain consistency, and just because of how well that tandem played, being able to kind of take some of that, because Mrazek is not going to play as much as Gibson did, and he's probably not going to be as good as Gibson was at some points. So in order for Dostal to maintain that responsibility, and just not being tired, being able to keep that same workload and not get overwhelmed, because I think there were times last year where it looked like you could see, okay, he's maybe starting to struggle a little bit with the workload. So just being able to maintain that consistency throughout the whole season.
Absolutely. And I think a lot will help with knowing that he does have kind of a consistent backup. I think there was a little weird up and down because of Gibson in and out with injury of like, okay, am I carrying the load now? Am I not? I think it's going to be a little bit more consistent or clear for him at least.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's especially for goalies, it's important to kind of have that routine of, okay, this is my game. I'm gonna go, and then whatever game I'm not gonna be in, like just being able to know how you. Well, I guess every game you prepare the same so that you're ready whether you get in or not. But just having that idea that okay, I'm gonna be playing this amount of games, and so I can prepare to be able to handle that responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And at least we all know that he's going to be the best looking goaltender out in the league this year. At least we'll have that. So, but thanks again, Derek, for joining me. That's unfortunately all the time we have, but I really appreciate you joining, and hopefully we'll be seeing you around the rink this next year a little bit more.
Thanks, Kyle. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And thank you, listener, for making Locked On Anaheim Ducks your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There is no offseason, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Go like and subscribe to this YouTube and podcast wherever you listen. And he is Derek Lee from The Hockey News. I'm Kyle Carr. And as always, be good out there.